everyone, now that we've gotten Dev Diary 149 out, I thought it would be a good time to kind of put both of them together because I read through 148 and felt it was a little short for me to do a video on. So, today we're looking over two Dev Diaries, and the first one is prestige goods, and we'll go through it a little quickly here. Prestige goods are essentially something that's going to be added into the Charters of Commerce DLC, so that is coming as the DLC, not essentially in the free update as far as we understand. And their idea here is that a lot of companies, though it sounds like not all companies, will have these various prestige goods they can produce when their prosperity is maxed out. They do give us some examples, such as 3 different versions of a prestige silk, and champagne is a prestige good variant of regular wine. And considering it's champagne, I'm probably guessing between that and the fact they've been using French companies for their example, that is probably for the French, because the French do have a special wine company in the game that we'll get into. And what they've told us so far is that there's going to be about 50 historical examples of goods and companies, which sounds like we have at least 50 different prestige goods in the game. And the example they give is the French company that will be able to produce the Saint Anton rifles. I hope I pronounced that correctly. I suppose we'll find out, or if I need to look up more French. And that once a company reaches 100 prosperity, all the buildings they own will start producing that prestige good instead of producing the regular rifles, as we can see here. Presumably these 5 levels are all owned by the company, so they're producing 43 of those special rifles rather than the regular small arms. And they are saying that it doesn't necessarily mean that France has an exclusive right to the good. Country borders can always change. This basically means if you go in and you take an area that has the special company and you get that company, you can make these too. It's just, France starts with the territory, so it's technically a French company. And they have done this as well, which I very much like, that it will show you in your market, hey, how much of the stuff in my market is small arms? How much of it is the Saint Anton rifles? And I very much like this because we even get a percentage breakdown, so you don't have to do any head math. The game's doing it for you. It's doing it for you. It does say that this is for the world market, I'm noticing, but I'm assuming that we can get this for our national market as well, because if they've done it for the world market, surely we can get it for the national market too, because obviously we have trade going on as well, and if that's being sent to the world market, then it means our trade centers can buy it. And they have said that for companies that lack a historical good, we can get a journal entry with an additional requirement to become one of the top 3 producers of the according good to make a generic kind of prestige good. So this tells me they do mention prestige cloth and prestige iron. So I think we can get at least, as they show here, prestige clothes and prestige iron. So we've got about 50 companies they mentioned before, and then some are going to be generic ones as well, it looks like. I don't know how prestige clothes would do, though. I'm a little skeptical on that. That's a little interesting. If we kind of head over to our little game here that I've got set up, I'm still not used to moving these, and we head over to this lovely group of laborers and check their needs with clothing. Simple clothing does use fabric and clothes, but Pops already heavily use clothes over fabric if possible. And then when you're at standard clothing, it's just clothes, so I'm not sure what the idea behind prestige clothes is. I kind of understand what their intent with it is, but I'm just a little confused. I suppose it would make them use even less fabric here when they're below the standard of living of 15 at a base level. And I guess the extra prestige you would get from producing the good would be very nice as well. Oh, you know what? Actually, I can think of a reason. I can think of a good reason for it. If you're making prestige clothes and there are regular clothes in a market, you could probably export this to the global market, and maybe trade centers will buy that over regular clothes, and that'll give you a competitive edge to just mass sell clothes on the global market. That would actually make a lot of sense. And they have mentioned this as well in the Dev Diary, that prestige goods have different effects. obviously they're going to have a prestige effect because these are prestige goods. It'd be really weird if they didn't. Prestige goods do provide a trade advantage bonus based on the percent of goods of that type that are prestige good. And we can kind of see here the relative advantage for exports from these small arms, from these special guns that are being produced, as well as, well, actually, this one is just how much it looks like. Oh no, prestige good production, it's both. I saw the production market error and I was like, oh, it's just that. No, it's both. That's even better then. That's very good. So yeah, back to the clothes point really here that I just made. That would be the intent there with prestige clothes. It wouldn't really shift pop consumption that much, I think, because they don't really have options, but you would get a trade advantage in exporting it, which would make it easier for your trade centers to do well with exporting it, which would help your businesses. And prestige goods that are used in buildings do get consumed. So we see Swedish ore grounds iron is being used here to make tools. And because 10% of the input is prestige goods, it's actually giving a 2% throughput for the building, which if we go by numbers here, that would mean at 100, if you could get it to 100%, you'd be looking at a 20% increase, which is not bad. That's not bad of an increase. And 20% more production just from using prestige goods is pretty nice. And they've also mentioned, obviously, if we're using the Saint Anton rifles here, I don't think it's Anton. I think I'm mispronouncing it badly, and I apologize to anyone from France who's having to listen to me butcher it. But feel free to correct my pronunciation and let me know how to actually pronounce it, because I do like learning pronunciation, like how I was calling oligarchy oilgarchy, and then I got corrected. And it's like, well, now we know how to say that. We learn, and that's what we're here to do. We're here to learn and have fun. But yes, you can use things such as those rifles to boost the damage of your armed forces further, depending on the prestige good in question. So I'm actually wondering if the prestige good is used in a mobilization option and therefore is now consumed, would that also have an effect? Because the armies have lots of mobilization options. They consume what we saw on one of the dev live streams when they were playing Argentina, that you can get prestige meat, at least from Argentina's special company. And I'm wondering, when you do the mobilization options that add meat to your armies, does the consumption of that cause an even higher benefit? That'd be something to find out. And they do also mention, and I was mentioning this earlier because I had read it, pops will consume more of a particular good, depending on how much of it is a prestige good. Which means prestige goods, and here are some examples, can basically act as pseudo-obsessions. So we have bananas, opium, tobacco, tea, they mention all of those, porcelain, we know champagne is wine. They even have paper on here as well, and the ships. I believe one of these is steamers, the other might be warships, I'm not sure. And that all of this that is consumable by pops would end up increasing their consumption of that particular good. That's why I'm calling it pseudo-obsessions, because it would make them consume more of a certain good as if they had an obsession. Furthermore, they also mentioned that they've increased the chance of pops getting obsessed with a particular good, and that gets higher the more of that good is a prestige goods variant rather than a regular good, which means with enough effort, you could get almost everyone obsessed with tobacco with enough effort and hard focus if you had a prestige good of it and you were mass exporting it everywhere. Of course, that means you're going to have to spend a lot on subventions to flood the world market with extremely cheap tobacco, but that sounds like a plan to me, and that's definitely something we're going to try on our 1.9 run when we're doing our Amish Paradise as the USA. That would be really fun, but I'm now terrified by the thought of mass obsessions of opium because of the British. And here are some of the unique goods that they have mentioned before. We do have things like Baku oil, which means the Baku Oil Company just got more valuable. River Plate beef was from Argentina. That did come from the live streams that they were doing, so we know about that. We have Sicilian Sulfur, so it's not hard to guess which company is Sicilian Sulfur, Bohemian Crystal, Sozu Silk. These all kind of have it in their name. You can kind of guess what they are. And then other weapons like the Colt revolver and the Schneider guns. Oh man, I really got to get better pronunciations. That's Satsuma ware, which I believe is porcelain. And more silk. They did mention they had a couple of silk variants in the game. I see 2 different types of porcelain, maybe 3 if Bohemian Crystal is porcelain, because it is crystal. So there's your 3 silks. Sea Island Cotton. I probably should have looked up beforehand Sea Island Cotton, and in fact, I'm gonna do that right now if you give me just a moment, because now I'm curious, what is Sea Island Cotton? Ah. Okay. It used to be grown in places like Beaufort, so interesting. Anyway, sorry, I kind of just deviated there. I was like, what is this? And I see bent wood furniture. Now, really quickly, I actually want to go over the 2 furniture types that we see here, along with the fact they mentioned that we can have paper as a good. The reason why I wanted to go over those really fast before we move on is because, if you remember correctly, Pops can consume those, and they make a fantastic example for this. Go over to our farmers here because they'll consume more goods, and head over to their household items, which is furniture, glass, and paper. And if you've played Victoria 3 a long time, you'll know that Pops tend to start eating more glass as time goes on when you're making more, because it meets the household items at a higher equivalency than furniture. But if we got furniture as a prestige good, that could strongly shift them away from glass and more towards furniture. You can see they're eating more furniture than they are glass right now. But if we made furniture a prestige good, that would change significantly. Instead of being 58% of their consumption, it might be higher. It might push higher to 70%. I don't think you can get furniture as an obsession, like not regular furniture, because it's not a luxury good. Generally speaking, from people who have done data mining and whatnot, anything that's in this staple good cannot become an obsession. So none of this can ever be an obsession. But anything in the luxury category, it can definitely become an obsession no matter what. Such as meat. Livestock's really might be back on the menu, and I can't wait to do that. Maybe, fruit can finally have its day to not be so cheap, which is ironic because you'd think it'd be expensive. Although maybe not. In the day and age of Victoria, meat was kind of the obsession for the upper classes, and fruit was just kind of viewed as the thing for peasants, which is why lots of people got scurvy. Anyway, that is going to be this Dev Diary, and now we're going to move on to the next Dev Diary, which is the one that released today, Dev Diary 149, which is a combination of other changes brought to us by Doodles. And the first thing that they bring up that I love so much, and they mentioned that they only popped it in now because they believe they can get it to work, is bulk formation actions. And that is exactly what it sounds like. No longer will you have to, ideally, if it all works out here, it could break at the last minute. Ideally, if it works, you'll be able to do bulk actions for multiple armies or all of your armies if you want to. So instead of having to give each one this mobilization, constantly having to click through each one over and over again, you can just do it all in one go. You can select every army, such as the 3 armies of Brazil, and give it to all of them at once simultaneously. Tell them all to demobilize, all to raise conscripts. Tell all of them to go on a defensive stance, which I love. I really love that because I've had games before, and if you've seen my videos, you may have noticed this. We have had games where we had to go through and individually click through 3, 4, 5 armies to change their stance from offense to defense or vice versa. This, being able to switch them all at once, is going to be just such a good quality of life change. Honestly, I think it's the best part about this Dev Diary. Even though there's blockades that we'll go over in a moment, I think I love the bulk army actions the most because it removes a lot of those clicks the player always needs to do. And it's just really nice that they're doing that now that they're mostly figured out how it works. I say mostly because in case it breaks, we know that they're trying to get it to work and they're just having some problems. But yes, blockades will also be coming into the game, and they are exactly what they sound like. They're not like convoy raids. They're not just seeking out convoys to murder them, and so they've mentioned it does require overwhelming naval supremacy to actually enact. But if you do, looking here, blockades at their maximum effectiveness are crippling. Not only does it kill migration attraction, which makes sense, it is a minus 75% efficiency for shipping lanes originating or ending there. Minus 75% world market access. Minus 75% throughput for anything that needs sea access, such as your fishing wharves and shipyards. Meaning, with overwhelming naval supremacy, finally, you can lock the British on the island of Albion, preventing them from getting anywhere, and literally starve their economy to death. Now, I think, judging by reading the blockade level, I don't know if this would actually block their market access. I think you still have to do convoy rating for that. Otherwise, convoy rating would become kind of irrelevant. Well, I mean, it does say minus 75% efficiency for shipping lanes, so maybe we'll see in the game. I think we could actually probably starve Britain out with just mass blockades. I think that does work as exactly as it sounds, and it would drop market access by 75%. For the rest of Britain's empire, which that isn't zero. That's only down to 25%, which is why you would still want a convoy raid, but that's still really good and would probably take effect faster than convoy raiding. So between that and the world market access deletion you can cause, that sounds like it makes navies really strong, and I cannot wait to mess around with that at all. I would love to play someone like Russia and just watch the British starve as I blockade them en masse. Or, you know, another country like France or the US if they're mass exporting cotton and they're heavily reliant on it. And it does show here that Man of Wars, the capital ships will have a much better blockade strength, which makes sense because their convoy rating efficiency is terrible as well. They're also adding strategic objectives. That was a feature they'd introduced all the way back in 1.2. So when I say they're adding strategic objectives, what I mean is that they are now giving it to where each army gets a strategic objective that you can add at choice, which means now instead of having one strategic objective for this state during the civil war Brazil is fighting at the start, you can now have two of them set up, one for each army, so you're pushing for two different objectives at once. Meaning you can actually direct your army to push in a certain direction towards a specific state goal instead of telling them to push for Moscow and they're for whatever reason pushing into Crimea, even though you told them to go all the way to Moscow while you're invading Russia as Austria. So that's going to be really nice. It is going to be really nice that they will advance where you tell them to. Now, obviously, there's going to be some quirks with that. They will push towards the objective you assign, but if they have to take certain states to get there, they're going to take those first. So it does depend on, hey, is this, we already have a connection to it, or do we need to make pushes through 3 other states before we even border it? That is still going to matter, but the fact you can kind of direct their pushes now a little better is nice. And then War Goal tooltips. This is a very good quality of life addition because lots of players get confused, and I can understand why with certain war goals, on why they're losing their war support or why the enemy's war support isn't going down. Now, they're adding it into where you can basically mouse over each one, figure out why it's not working, and then it's going to tell you, hey, it will be contested. You will be occupying it if you have any of the following. You're occupying the state, you're occupying their capital, you're occupying the capital of their overlord. That is really good, and I'm wondering, is this something that we can only see during war, or can we see it while we're adding it during the diplomatic play? That's one thing I'm wondering. But even if it's just for during the war, this is still a very good change. It is a very good addition to the game, and I very much like it. It's a good quality of life addition. They've also mentioned a change to the company prosperity formula again. And it is now going to be the productivity of the company itself compared to global productivity of the types of buildings owned by the company. Which means now, in their example, they say if the company owns logging camps and rye farms, the prosperity from that productivity is only based on those buildings. How it works right now in 1.8, a company will check its prosperity based on the global average of all buildings and their prosperity levels, how productive they're being. So that's how it works right now, is if you have a grain company, or in this case of our example in the game, if you have a food industry company, right now in the game, it's global average productivity. This is checking every single building in the game. So it's not just comparing it to the food industries sitting over here in France. It's not just comparing these and how terrible they're doing. It's also comparing it to how well these vineyards are doing, even though they do not have relation with one another. It's comparing those together. It's comparing itself and how the opium fields in India are doing. It's also comparing itself to how the gold mines over here and the gold fields in the United States are doing. I don't know where the gold is. Here it is. It's comparing itself to all of those right now, even though that wouldn't affect its operations because you can't eat gold. Well, you can try. But now in 1.9, the company will only compare itself to the buildings that it owns. So food industries will only compare themselves to other food industries unless we can give them control over other buildings, so on and so forth. They are also making it to where you, as the country, can have a monopoly over buildings if you want. Now, they do mention that it does come at a cost with authority for country monopolies. But this does mean if you don't want your financial districts building certain buildings, you could just declare a monopoly on it. Boom. Now they can't build it at all. And in relation to that, we're going to switch over again really quickly here. Let's say you're trying to get rid of the landowners really hard. Like you are just trying to rip them out to where they cease to exist. But they keep building, they keep building wheat farms. They've got various ownerships, and they're going to build even more of them. I don't know if we've got an example in here. We don't. But the idea here is you could declare that all these wheat farms are now monopolized by the state. So any future wheat farms would have to be built by you. This would not, according to the Dev Diary, it will not cause all of the currently owned buildings to suddenly be monopolized. You will still need to go through the nationalization system and actually nationalize them to take them. But it will stop them from building more of them, and it will stop them from trying to buy it out, which I think is a pretty good change. How you would probably actually use it is, I can see a lot of players probably monopolizing gold mines. That way, any new gold mines that pop up, you don't have to build it immediately. You can just have a monopoly on these, and you can build them at your leisure. That way, you're getting the bonus from the minting, and then you're getting some of that weekly balance added as government dividends as well, so you're just printing money from your gold mines. That's what I could see a lot of players doing, as well as maybe other buildings like the trade centers as an example. Possibly certain highly productive buildings that you kind of just want to take and have the dividends get reinvested if you owned any of them. In this case, this is just owned by our company. I would probably say I don't have any good examples of that right now, except maybe this glass works here. But the idea here is that you would be kind of making certain buildings your own monopoly, just so you can have a lot of the dividends be sent in as reinvestment into your investment pool to help fuel construction of others. But you could also just do it to kind of sort of direct your investment pool. My thought process here is that, hey, we could monopolize logging camps, so they stop building logging camps. We're not doing it because we want full control of the logging camps. We could arguably still privatize them afterwards. But we can make it to where our financial districts, our investment pool, won't be building any. They'll be building other buildings. So I think that's another good idea here with the country monopolies. It allows you some control over directing your investment pool by just limiting their options. It doesn't guarantee they'll do what you want them to do, but you can minimize the RNG by spending some authority and locking down certain buildings. In addition to having companies owning monopolies on other buildings that would lock those down too. Though companies are going to be their own thing. They are also saying they're adding custom RNG seeds, which the short of it is that it lets you set specific RNG seeds so that random outcomes will be specific outcomes. Meaning you can have a certain role always be the same thing, and that's particularly useful for modders, just to have certain initialization starts. I don't know if this is something I would use, so I don't have too much interest in it, because I'm fine with the RNG itself. I bring all the drama that's funny. But I can see this being very useful if you wanted to set up certain circumstances and have certain outcomes occur for like a role-playing Let's Play aspect where you need the world to evolve and progress in a certain way. That could be pretty good. They have also added in a private investment log, so you can kind of see what your investment pool has done over the last maybe it's a couple of months. We don't have a lot of records here. It's only for January and February of the 1836. This is kind of nice. Oh, you know what? I actually see why this is good. Because when your investment pool privatizes like 6 buildings at once, you can now actually read it here and see that they privatize tobacco, coal, fishing, paper, more tobacco. So you can kind of see what they started spending all of it on. It even tells you which state it was in. That's kind of nice. To see what they're privatizing, that's good. And then colonization is getting just a slight tweak. They're going to be making it now where you're colonizing a new overseas state, like the British colonizing Kenya. Once you click to colonize there, you can pay however much it would cost to build a port. And as far as I'm understanding, it'll just build the port there. It'll just build it like that with a click, which is interesting because it means you don't have to direct your construction pool to build it, because it says we'll be granted a port in the state, and I assume that's if we choose to pay the cost. So that's a little interesting. It kind of takes out the need to build the port and shift it in your construction queue. I think it's just a nice little quality of life thing, but I think it's also going to help the British AI colonize faster because they don't have to wait for the port now. And they're doing something I'm really liking here as well. They are giving the movements their own little symbols. So you can see the Confederacy's flag is on the pro-slavery movement for America, ethno-nationalist symbol for the American supremacist movement. Liberals get the little bird for the liberal ideology. Abolitionists have the abolitionist symbol. If we were to look at movements right now in 1.8, they all kind of share the same symbol. If they're political, if they're a cultural movement, they all kind of just share the same symbol. So you end up having to kind of go through the list to figure out the one you're looking for. They are organized alphabetically, which is helpful, but you still have to kind of look through and figure out which one you're looking for. With 1.9, that's going to be a bit different because now they're all going to have their own symbols, which makes them a little easier to find. And the tooltips will now clearly list the laws that the movement supports or opposes, which is really nice. We also saw during the live streams that if you're in the middle of your law enactment screen, like you're going through your laws list, it will actually show the movements there as well alongside the interest groups showing whether they support or oppose things. Let me kind of give us a quick idea for that there. So if you go over to your laws page and, we go to tenant farmers and we're like, oh, we kind of want to do homesteading here. And it shows all of our interest groups here. Up here at the top page, what we saw during the Argentina live streams, which they're supposed to do another one later. I think it's on the 9th. We saw one of the movements was up here as well, supporting certain laws and opposing other laws. And that was a nice little change because you could presumably mouse over, and then see what they're supporting and opposing and why. And it's just a nice little change because you don't have to do as much digging. You still see it here, like effect on loyalists from successful enactment is there in 1.8. But they're just doing all these little changes that makes it a bit easier to find the information you're looking for without having to dig through a bunch of different tooltips. They're also adding relevant map modes to the budget panel. Well, they did that for 1.8. I'm sorry, I'm reading ahead. I'm reading backwards. What I mean is that they're adding this to more panels. So for buildings, it looks like they're adding all kinds of things related to GDP, literacy, migration, attraction. Basically, they're making it easier to find certain map modes for various things you're looking at, which ideally means it's going to be easier to find the information you're looking for without having to dig through a bunch of different menus. Make it a bit easier to understand the game. I don't know how good it will be, but it's one of those nice little things that, maybe we'll use this a lot, maybe we won't use it that much, but I kind of like that they're adding it because I think it's going to help some folks. Just for them, it might give them the information they're looking for, and people might find that same information through different methods in the game. That's just how it is. They are adding some modding changes as well, and we are going to dig into this a bit because one of the things they're adding is a law variant in 1.9 where Qing will now start with the canton system, a different version of isolation. So Qing will actually be able to trade, but only in Western Guangdong. So they can only trade through there. So it's a pseudo-isolationism version. If you compare the two laws here, we can see that there are some differences. Their taxation capacity is lower, tax spread isn't as bad, they don't get as much authority. but they do only get half the trade capacity, so that's a bit painful. So that is interesting. They're kind of basically giving China the ability to trade. It also, well, actually, I say the ability to trade as if Qing couldn't trade before. They are kind of putting Qing on isolationism, but making sure it can still trade at the start, which is going to kind of change how Qing games. Man, that kind of makes me want to play Qing now for 1.9. The 15% taxation capacity and authority at the start might actually be really good. And you can still get trade, it's just gonna be painful. I'm actually interested in that, but basically, modders are going to be able to make law variants. So there are some kind of big alternative mods out there for Victoria 3. People usually added in their own new laws. Now you're gonna be able, modders out there are gonna be able to make variants of various laws, which is going to be very nice flavor. There's also trade setup as well now because they've changed how trade works entirely, so you can set up a lot of that. This is going to be very nice. I think these two Dev Diaries back to back was very nice. The prestige goods are going to be kind of a game changer. They're essentially pseudo-obsessions when it comes to consumption, but I think making those alongside monopolies is going to be the most fun. That will be the most fun to me, is creating pseudo-obsession monopolies and watching the companies reap a lot of benefits. I think it'll make graduated taxation really good, because if those companies are getting a ton of money, yes, items will be more expensive, but if you can then switch your taxation to primarily dividends, you could work that off and probably get even more cash out of it at the end. And then a lot of these little changes that they've made here, I kind of just did the wrong click there. I like a lot of these quality of life changes they're adding in for the update. Strategic objectives are nice. Blockades are going to make navies more important. Bulk formation actions is just absolutely the best, in my opinion, for this. It's going to reduce, presuming it works, it's going to reduce a lot of clicking. And I just wanted to mention it again because that's how much I like it. So that is Dev Diary 148 and 149. Do let me know what you thought, and I will see you all next time.